What a beautiful volumetric sphere. And what a beautiful lighting. Everything sounds so good. But why is it that we see our world as 3D? Is it something with our eyes, or is it the shadows? We'll see. Let's try to remove the shadows for a while. Now the world looks so flat. There is no volume. So yeah, the shadows do a lot. And today we will go over how is a shadow created and how can we fake a real shadow. You gotta trust me, it is not that hard. You just have to figure out how a shadow works, and that's exactly what I'm gonna tell you today. So make sure to stick till the end. Let's start at what the heck is a shadow. A shadow is a dark area where light from a light source is blocked by an opaque object. Shadows tell us a lot. Sometimes the form or shape of an object is revealed more by its shadow than the object itself. So they do really matter. As you know, different objects have different shadows, and the shadow totally depends on the light source. If there's a hard light, the shadow will be hard, and if there's a soft light, the shadow also will be soft. Now, I'm not trying to fill up your mind with all this cliche that you already know, so let's dive deeper and let's get to know the components of a shadow so that we can be more effective when we are painting it. Alright, number one, we have the highlight. Well, it is the light that's been shining onto the object by the light source. It's pretty obvious, I don't need to explain about it. Number two is the halftones. It is a smooth transition between the light area and the dark area on the object. It is kind of like the 50% gray between the black and the white. It is just not too dark and not too bright. As the name suggests, it is halftone. Number three, it is the Terminator. Pretty cool name, right? As the name suggests again, it terminates the light area and starts the dark area. It is the midline between the light and the dark. It's kind of like the border, the Terminator. At number four, we have the form shadow. It is the dark side on the object. It's the opposite of the light. So where the light is shining is gonna be the highlight, and where the light cannot reach on the object is supposed to be dark. So it's called the form shadow. Number five is the Ombre. It is a Latin word for contact shadow, or the occlusion as some guys name it. It is just simply the darkest part of the cast shadow. It's right beneath the object and no light can reach there, so it's kind of purely black. You can't see any light in there. Number six is the Penumbra. It is a softer shade of the cast shadow. So we have the cast shadow and it has three components. It's the Ombre, Penumbra, and Entombra, which I have not included Entombra here, but there can be Entombra in some cases. So the Penumbra comes after the Ombre, and it is lighter and softer. That's all you need to know. And finally, number seven is the reflection. There might or there might not be a reflection depending on the surface on which your object is sitting upon. If the surface is brighter, there will be more reflection, and if it is darker, there will be less or no reflection at all. So I have an image of 3 cups and there are no shadows. I removed the bottommost shadow so I can paint it back in so you can watch clearly how I do it. And as you can see, the first thing you need to do is to determine where the light source is. Based on the shape of these cups, you can see that the right side is a little darker than the left side. So which means that the light is coming from the top left area of the image, just right there. So that's where my light is coming from, and the shadows will be likely over the opposite part, right? So I'm gonna create a layer and I'm gonna grab a black color. Keep in mind that shadows are never black, but here I'm gonna paint with black because this is just for demonstration. And you don't need to change the blend mode to multiply because this is the darkest color already, but if you choose not black, then you need to change the blend mode to multiply. But let me change it anyway. I'm gonna put it to multiply and I will bring my flow down to about 3 to 4%, and then I'm gonna create the Ombre. If you can remember, it was the Ombre. So make sure you have a soft brush, and I said this is the Ombre. This is the darkest part of the cast shadow. It is the contact shadow or the occlusion. No light can reach here, so you have to paint very close to the bottom of the object, and it needs to be super dark because there's no light. So very gently and slowly I'm painting, and I try to keep it as smooth as I can. I don't want one part to be darker than the other. This should be smooth all over, and it should be very thin, very narrow type of shadow. You know, this is the contact shadow, so you need to be very careful with this. I'm painting slowly and gently like this. And whenever you make a mistake, make sure to use the eraser tool. It is your best friend when it comes to painting shadows. And after that, I'm actually going to paint a little more on a new layer, and this is going to be our penumbra. This is, if you can remember, the lighter version of the ombre. It is larger and it is softer and it is lighter. So I'm just painting, and I'm painting in the direction where the shadow is probably going to be casted. So if the light is coming from this side, then the shadows go that side, pretty opposite. Shadows and lights are on the opposite side. It is so logical, you know, surprisingly logical thing. So I'm giving brush strokes like that, and it's super soft and super light, and if you pay attention, you can see that I'm constantly switching between the eraser tool and the brush tool. So I hit E for my eraser and I erase off the parts that I think are not looking good, and then I hit B for my brush and then paint back in. Now I'm using the eraser tool to erase off the extras. Use the eraser tool to make your shadow blend in with the ground. The closer a shadow is to the object, the more opaque it will look. It is darker if it's closer to the object, and as it gets further away, it becomes lighter. You don't need any magical graphic tablet or pen to be able to draw this. I'm using a mouse, totally 100% a super crappy mouse. So if I can do it, you can do it either. Then after I've done this, I'm going to create a new layer, and I will clip it to the cup itself because I'm going to paint shadows on the cup. Never forget to paint form shadows. If you can remember, a form shadow is the type of shadow that is casted onto the object itself. So the opposite direction of light is going to be darker. So the left side of this cup is going to be absolutely darker than the right side because less light can reach there. So never forget to paint shadow on the object itself. It creates a 3D look, and you will see before and after how much more dimension it gives to the object just by painting a little shadow on this side. And constantly switching between the eraser and the brush tool, I'm trying to get it to look good, and there you go. I painted the form shadow, I painted the ombre, I painted the penumbra, and we're looking good, right? Everything will flow naturally with enough practice. Here I have prepared for you another example. It's another cup, but it's a little bit more complicated. We're gonna paint a bit more shadows, and we're gonna pay attention to more details over here, but this time I'm gonna go a little bit faster. I'm gonna fast forward this part of the video because I don't want this to last forever, but I'll be explaining as I'm creating this. So again, first I'm creating the ombre, the closest shadow to the object. It's right beneath the object and it is the darkest. So on a new layer with multiply blend mode, I'm creating the ombre, and again, please pay attention that I'm using the black color. You should not be using black for shadows. I'm just doing this for demonstration, but at the end of this, I will be changing the colors of the shadows as well so they look more natural. You'll see. On a separate layer, I'm creating the penumbra, the lighter, larger, and softer version of the ombre. So pretty basic. I just create a new layer on top of the ombre and I paint with the same color but softer and bigger to complete the cast shadow. Right now I'm painting the form shadow. I have clipped a layer to the cup and the saucer, and I'm painting on the cup to create the form shadow because the opposite side of the light, remember, is always darker. So I'm darkening this part of the object. Always constantly use the eraser tool to refine your shadow. And if you've gone too far, you've drawn too much, make sure to bring down the opacity. Adjust it accordingly. Let's go ahead and apply the same rules over again. This cup is sitting on top of the saucer, so it needs a contact shadow. Let's create the contact shadow for this. Every contact shadow or the ombre comes with a penumbra, remember? So we need to paint the penumbra too. This cup has a handle, and the handle is a shadow. So let's create the handle's shadow. You know, shadows look exactly the same as the object, so if the object has a handle, the shadow needs a handle as well. Here comes the form shadow on the cup. Remember, this side of the cup is facing in the opposite direction of the light source, so it needs to be darker, which means we have to paint the form shadow in here. Now that I am done painting my shadows, I will merge all my shadows into one single layer, and then I will clip a solid color adjustment layer to them, and I will choose an appropriate color. The shadows on the cup should be a dark blue, so I will sample a dark blue color and clip it to the shadows, and that makes a ton of difference. I will exactly do the same with the shadows beneath the cup. I will sample a color from the ground and clip it to those shadows, and that will make it so much more realistic. And there you can watch my before and after. Look how much more realism just shadows add to your composite. So be mindful of that. Moving on to the third example. And here in our final example, I have prepared a more tangible kind of example that you most likely deal with. You are probably dealing with people more than cups and saucers. So here we are. And again, the principles are exactly the same. All you need to do is to follow the same exact steps, but a little bit different that I'm going to show you now. First, I have to determine where the light direction is coming from. It is coming from the top right side. I'm assuming it's coming from there. I have no idea where the light is coming from, but yeah, it's coming from there. You can see the door at the back is open and the light is shining from that side, so I'm right. And these areas are going to be shadowy, and this left side of the man is going to be shadowy as well. So you know what I'm going to be doing now. Okay. Let me put a layer to multiply blend mode, get my soft brush, and bring down the flow and start painting with black again. And this is gonna be an ombre or a contact shadow. I go from the left to right, I go from the bottom of the shoe to the top of the shoe, straight brush strokes. And by the way, make sure to put your layer beneath the man or beneath the model, not on top of it. I have to drag the layer beneath the man. Okay, let me paint here a little bit. I drag the layer beneath the model, and just with straight brush strokes I go from the bottom of the shoe to the tip of the shoe, just like that. And this is going to be my occlusion or my contact shadow. Pretty easy, right? This is the before and the after. I'm gonna do the exact same thing with the other foot. Just follow the path of the shoe. Go straight from behind to the front. Paint gently and patiently. Don't rush painting the shadows. Most of the cases when you rush in painting the shadows, you will see trash. And use the eraser if needed. Make sure your eraser is soft with a low flow and use it all the time. I said don't be afraid of using the eraser tool either when painting shadows or when painting highlights. You gotta use it anyways. Okay, there we go. Now I'm gonna create a new layer and I'm going to create the reflection, and it's pretty easy. Just go something like this. You can see this is the reflection of the shoe to the floor. It does not need any details, it does not need anything, just the color should be right, which we will change at the end. But right now just focus on the shape. Just create the reflection pretty easily with a simple brush and using a mouse. I'm doing it. You see that? And I'm constantly using the eraser as well. You can toggle between the layers if you need to. But yeah, this is our reflection. I will change the blend mode to multiply too. Pretty basic, nothing too crazy over here. We are trying to create our shadow using those very basic principles that I taught you. Just like that. And I will do the same exact thing for the other shoe right there after I'm done with this one. There you go, and we do the same exact thing for our shoe. You just have to have a clear vision of how the light works and how the shadows are going to be casted on the floor. Everything else is just a matter of practice, and you will get used to this once you paint a couple of shadows. This is way easier than you think, guys. I've been there. I know I have been like obsessed with how some guys paint shadows, how the shadows are gonna look realistic. I can't even paint that and all that stuff, but trust me, this is way easier. And this is our reflection, as you can see. I'm gonna stop here. You can spend way more time on this, but I'm just going to stop here. And I'm gonna create another layer, and this is going to be my penumbra. This is lighter and larger. If you've been paying attention, you probably know that I have been following basically the same principles over and over and again. First I paint the ombre, then I paint the penumbra, then I paint the form shadow and all that, and all those with exactly the same techniques with a brush and an eraser. Isn't that very simple? So now painting shadows are easier than ever been before. I'm going to create a new layer, and I will grab my gradient tool and I will create a gradient that goes from black to transparent. Make sure that it goes from black to completely transparent, just like that. The opacity is 0 there, as you can see. I'm gonna hit OK, and then I will create a gradient, and the opacity is set to 100%. Choose the radial gradient and do this. And this blob that I created, I'm going to grab it and hold shift and make it look like that. And I want to put it beneath this man to create the kind of a dark spot beneath him. You could have done this with a brush dab as well, but I rather use the gradient here. And I will bring down the opacity to about maybe 15%. I just want a little tint of that shadow right beneath this man to indicate that there is less light on the surface on which he is standing. Okay, we have the Ombre, we have the Penumbra, we have the reflection. Now it's time to match these colors. I'm going to create a solid color and I will clip it to my reflection. I'm going to name it reflection, and double click, and I will sample a color from the floor. It's going to be darker than usual, but as you can see, with that color it makes a ton of change. Just choose a dark color from the floor, and there you go. You see the change, that the reflection looks much more realistic. I will do the same with my Penumbra. I will create another solid, I'll clip it to my Penumbra, and I will sample another color from the floor and I'll make it dark. So there you go, that's our Penumbra. Probably a darker color, just like that. Last but not least, I will clip a layer to my model and I'm going to paint the form shadow, so the opposite direction of light, where less light is going to be reaching the model. I'm going to paint with black just to darken a little bit. This is actually like burning, dodging and burning process, if you can remember. So I'm going to burn the left side of this man, the right side of his, and the left side of mine. So basically, I'm going over the face too, but not gonna paint too much on the face, because it'll look weird. So only the left side, just like that. Here's the before, here's the after. You see the change here? And always be careful not to go too far, so use the eraser because it'll look fake if there's too much darkness here. You just need a little bit. And I'm gonna create another layer and clip this one to my model, and this one's going to be for the highlight. So just like the opposite, I will grab the white color and I will paint with white on the other side to create the reflection of the light. You remember that sphere that we talked about at the beginning of the video? Number one was the highlight, so we need the highlight here as well. Especially the shoes are shiny, so there's gonna be more light on the shoes than the rest of the clothing. I burned the left side, so I'm dodging the right side right now. You're gonna do the exact opposite of what you did just a minute ago. And once I'm done, I will just adjust the opacity till it looks realistic enough. I'll create another layer on top of everything. This is only if you want to do it. Just create a light source so that everything looks kind of more logical and more realistic. Just a very slight light source over there. Let me show you a before and after. Here is the before and here is the after. Isn't that awesome? And to bring everything together, I'm going to create a global effect on top of everything. I'll use a gradient map, a custom gradient map that goes from a dark brown to a bright brown, and I will change the blend mode to soft light and adjust the opacity. And there we have our composition for today. I hope this video was useful for you and it helped you learn something new. And if it did, please consider subscribing and smashing that like button. It's gonna help a lot in terms of keeping the channel going. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next episode.